I watched a video on that this morning, the Adam and Eve video.
Oh yeah, the Chan Thomas thing.
Jesus Christ.
That's an interesting one. And
how much of that is agreed upon? That there could be a time where the magnetic poles actually shift.
So this is science. They say that the last one was like 778,000 years ago, and we're like something like 200,000 years overdue. But the Adam and Eve story, the theory of that is that it happens in cycles of 6,500 years, and that it's a 90-degree flip, but 6 days later, or on the seventh day, it corrects itself.
The planet flips, not just
correct. It's a planet flip, 90-degree, and that because of it, the Earth essentially does a standstill. The sun will basically stay in the same spot, causing heating like we've never experienced, and that the wind and the waters continue with their momentum. Because essentially the wind travels at approximately 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. So the theory is that when that event happens, it's going to be cataclysmic. And here's the wild thing is that in that document, it says a continental-sized tsunami being 2 miles high. Well, I showed you the Emikusi volcano in Africa in the Sahara, which is at 11,300 feet, that has salt as well as evidence of gastropods, sea life.
That's 2 miles high.
Yes. And I'm like, it would make a lot of sense. Like if you look at the Bible and involving like Revelations and it's saying like
6 days.
6 days on the seventh day, God rested. In that document, it says 6 days things start simmering down a bit, and by day 7 things are starting over new.
So what's the science behind this complete reversal of the magnetic poles?
So real quick, this is the part that sets me off about this is that any article you ever read on this, it makes it crystal clear that this will not be apocalyptic. Maybe we'll potentially have some satellite communication issues that could affect our power grid and telecommunication systems, and that's going to be unfortunate. But don't worry, it's not a doomsday. I'm like, okay, first of all, if the grid goes down, that is doomsday. But number two, they don't know what they're talking about because they claim that the geomagnetic pole shift is because of the interior, whether it's the iron core or whatever it is, the molten core, does a shift, and because of it, that's why the compass will flip. But I'm like, if you look at the nature of earthquakes, some originate in the crust, others originate in the mantle, in the parts that aren't solid. So I'm like, if you're saying that the interior that is molten does a shift, why on earth would you suggest that it wouldn't cause earthquakes or volcanic activity on the surface? So I feel like every article I ever read on geomagnetic pole shifts, they go out of their way to say, don't worry, it's fine. And I'm like, but yet the evidence shows that it's accelerating. Back in just the 1990s, it was traveling, the North Pole was transitioning at 10 miles a year. Now it's at 40 or almost 40 miles. It's accelerating. And then the Adam and Eve story, it talks about, actually, no, not the Adam and Eve story. There was a documentary on Nova years ago that the evidence shows that when they've studied all the other volcanic rock, for prior known pole shifts, because keep in mind, there's hundreds that are known. This has happened throughout millions and millions of years. This is mainstream science. The poles do flip. But it's not that the Earth flips over. It's that the inside core does, and so your magnetic compass will flip. Like
what causes it?
So whatever that molten core is, it does a shift inside. It allegedly happens in cycles, and we're long overdue. And when it happens, the other theory is that the Earth's shields will be diminished.
Well, definitely. So we know two things right now is that the pole is moving. So it's off. I think it's off even the South Pole might be off of Antarctica at this point, like the magnetic south. And then the magnetic field consequently to this movement is weakening. So we know our magnetic field, and that's where a lot of that danger is going to come from is if the magnetic field keeps weakening. Now everything cosmically that happens is going to hit the Earth, and particularly us with our electronics, it's all going to get more easily smashed because the magnetic field is what protects us from solar flares and cosmic radiation and all this stuff. So as the field and the acceleration of that weakening of the field, is accelerating. So it's getting weaker faster. So we seem to be heading towards a unknown or undetermined time where the poles may shift, like the polarity of the Earth will shift, and the compasses.
And
will
are
flip,
there
but we
any
don't know
estimates on when this could possibly take place?
According to every article I ever read, like, oh, don't worry, it's probably another 1,000 years. I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. It's accelerating, and if you look, you don't have to Google this, Jamie. I don't know there's a mountain chain in eastern Oregon where it's the most evidence of a pole shift. That there was a volcano that was active during the shift, and if you take a compass along the volcanic rock, the compass will slowly start to change. And so wherever like pottery or volcanic rock solidifies, that wherever the North Pole is at that time, it's an imprint, and the compass will continue to show that. It's really fun. Take a compass around volcanic rock, and it'll move the compass to wherever the North Pole was then. But here's the interesting part, is that what it shows is that the pole shifts start slow, and then they accelerate to the point where the day that it happens, you could potentially see the compass slowly moving. And then when you go back to this Adam and Eve story talking about the pole shift, they say that the event happens in approximately a quarter of a day, so 6 hours. So it's like it comes out of nowhere. And I'm like, what if, like I'm into the cosmic impact, that there's unbelievable evidence that definitely happened. But there's other things that happen on Earth, whether it's super volcanoes. What if that's related to pole shifts as well? And the reason why the evidence wouldn't be necessarily that we couldn't find it is because if the Adam and Eve story, if the details discussed in it are accurate, the reason why we're not seeing the evidence of it is because it flips right back and thus masks the evidence that it ever happened. So it's pretty wild.
You guys are freaking me the fuck out, man.
Hey, can you let's just text Elon real quick. He knows. He talks about no writing before 10,000 years, and then he's saying it afterwards, and he's talking about deep rabbit hole. I listened to what he says. He's careful with his words. And I mean, since we know there's been 5 interglacial periods over the last 450,000 years, this is the topic. You want to see something else? President Trump said it too.
What did he say?
I have the video on my laptop. It's only 30 seconds long. If you YouTube Donald Trump on climate scientists, basically they were talking about global warming, and he basically interrupts and says, "It's going to cool first, though, isn't it?" And the scientist is like, "Oh, that's not what the evidence shows." And he kind of laughs. He goes, "I'm not so sure you know that." And I'm like, of course he would know. People are like, "Oh, Donald Trump's anti-science, he's stupid." I'm like, he didn't just pull that out of his ass. He was saying
when
something.
He was the president?
Yes, this was just a few years ago. This is probably his last year of his term. I have the clip on my laptop. It's a 30-second clip, or maybe 20 seconds. He said it's going to cool first, though, before, isn't it? And I'm like, I look at what Musk is saying and this evidence of the pole shift. I think that the true data on Earth is that the Earth is cold most of the time. That right now we should be grateful that it's nice and cozy because we can live when it's warm. But I think that the data might indicate that Earth is cold more often than it's hot.
Well, that's what Randall Carlson has said. And what Randall Carlson said that really freaked me out, he goes, global warming's not scary. He goes, global cooling
is scary.
That's what's really scary. But we're so concerned with our own guilt and impact because of industrialized society and what sort of impact we're having on the climate and the earth and our air